Good afternoon to ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our webinar titled Awareness on Recent GST Developments. So today's session, our speakers for today are Ms. Pavani Acharya, Ms. Puchita, and Mr. Basuraju from Accounting and Business Support team. So before we start the session, a few instructions for the participants. Uh, Before we begin, please note that all the participants will be in listen-only mode throughout the webinar. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the questions session in the chat. The session will be followed by Q&A. A link of the recording to this webinar will be emailed to you. Kindly reach out to us if you are having any difficulties with this. Thank you. And now I will hand over to Ms. Pavani Acharya to begin our session today.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Pavani, and I'm the first speaker of today's webinar. So, a brief introduction of what we will be taking you through in this webinar will be we will be taking you through those checklists and action points that are very high priority as on today from GST perspective, and latest amendments and notifications in the recent times, and later we will take you through case law analysis. So we are all aware that this pandemic is continuing to have a great impact on our economy and our compliances from the perspective of tax regulations. September to December being the important compliance months in India, uh, we have to follow many things to comply with all those points. Nonetheless, government since March 2020 has taken various steps to support its taxpayers by at least relaxing the interest and late fee compliances and extending the due dates for various compliances. Today, we are going to touch upon the points like what are those mandatory provisions that are applicable from October, those points that have to be kept in mind from filing September 2020 return perspective, and that will be filed in October 2020, because if we miss out those ITC claims or amendments, and if the company discovers it later, it is just a cost to the company, and various precautions and information that have to be kept ready for GST audit, and a few other business transactions and situations that are faced by the companies as on today during the pandemic, and the suggestions and advice that we are going to give about those. So let's jump into the first topic, that is action points and checklists of high priority as on today. So first thing being e-invoicing system and QR code. I'm very sure and I hope the companies to which this system is applicable, they have already rolled it out from 1st October onwards, being 1st October is the applicable date for this system. So before going to the concerns that affects this e-invoicing system and QR code, I will just brush up on the provisions that will be applicable for e-invoicing system and QR code. So basically, this e-invoicing system and QR code was introduced by notification number 68 and 72 respectively, by amending the rules relating to tax invoice and how the invoices have to be raised. The applicability threshold for these two systems is more than 500 crores, the aggregate turnover more than 500 crores in any preceding financial year. It need not be immediately preceding financial year. It can be any financial year from 2017-18 onwards. So for both, the threshold limit will be more than 500 crore aggregate turnover. And it is applicable from 1st October 2020 for e-invoicing. QR code and dynamic QR code is a little pushed to 1st December by the recent notification. And the category of supplies that it will be applicable is for e-invoicing system. It will be B2B taxable supplies. including the exports. And for QR code system, the type of transactions that will be applicable is B2C taxable supplies. Though QR code system provisions are inserted in bill of supply rules also, that is relating to exempt supplies, these are not yet made mandate, I mean, they are not yet notified. So as of now, exempt supplies are not covered under QR code system. So both e-invoicing and QR code as on today will be for taxable supplies, including exports. Then to whom it is not applicable? One, SEZ units, then insurers, banking companies, GTA service providers, then passenger transportation companies, and theaters. Okay, so coming to the quick procedures, how this invoice reference number is generated and all. So first we have to generate a normal standard format invoice in our current billing or invoicing system. So once it is done, some specific criteria and specific particulars have to be uploaded in the invoice registration portal that is given by the GST network. After uploading all these details, we will get something called invoice reference number. After getting this invoice reference number, this invoice has to be digitally signed and it will generate automatically a QR code system. The scan, when we scan that QR code system, we'll get many particulars such as GSTIN of the supplier, GSTIN of the recipient, then IRN number, then invoice number, date, taxable value. All these things we can get it from those QR code system. Some points that we have to note it here is, though from 1st October it is made mandatory, the government has recently on 1st October it has given one relaxation saying the registered persons to whom it is applicable, this e-invoicing system is applicable. However, from 1st October to 31st October, they could not raise under e-invoicing system. They can raise in the normal invoice method, but however within 30 days of raising those invoices they have to upload all the specific particulars on IRP but within 30 days. So this is relaxation given only from 1st October to 31st October. So if at all few companies are not able to generate IRN or they are not able to generate invoices under e-invoicing system, whenever they generate normal invoices, they have to, within 30 days, they have to upload those particulars on the IRP portal and they can take this advantage. And secondly, these QR codes can be presented instead of physical copies to the proper officers to who will check those particulars instead of physical copies. And also the invoices which are supposed to be raised under e-invoicing, however it is not raised, such invoices will be considered as invalid. And now for example, those registered persons to whom this e-invoicing system is not applicable also, this matter concerns to them because they have to identify the vendors or the suppliers who go above 500 crore turnover limit, and they have to see that they issue invoice with invoice reference number. Otherwise, they cannot take the input tax credit. I'm very sure, like most of you people who will come under 500 crore, you have to identify the vendors who go above 500 crore, and if you have to see that they are raising invoice reference number, and then only you can take the input tax credit. Otherwise, such invoices will be considered as invalid and ITC will be considered as ineligible. Let's go to the next action point or the checklist, that is ITC reversal in case of non-payment of consideration. So as per the provisions of section 16, it keeps one condition to take the input tax credit. What is that? If payment is not made to the supplier within 180 days of the raising of invoice, the ITC away should be added back to the output tax liability. That means you have to pay back that ITC which you had taken earlier, and you have to even pay interest of 18% from the date of availing such credit. However, there is exception to this condition. where supplies are made for which under RCM, reverse charge mechanism, the tax has to be paid, then this 180 days condition will not be applicable. Secondly, Schedule 1 transaction, that is deemed supply without consideration. This, for example, you have transactions with your related parties. This transaction is covered under Schedule 1 transaction. So under this 180 days condition will not be applicable. One point that has to be kept in mind under this condition is import of goods. So import of goods, if you are importing any goods, there can be two parties. You are importing goods from related party or you are importing goods from unrelated party. So if you are importing goods from related party, then this 180 days condition will not be covered, will not be applicable because they are covered under Schedule 1 transaction. However, if you are importing goods from unrelated parties, there are two schools of thoughts. It is a gray area. One school of thought says there is a bill of entry which is the tax payment document, because IGST is not covered under RCM, it is covered under import of goods. IGST is covered under customs. You will be paying IGST along with customs. It will be recorded in the bill of entry, so it is the tax payment document for me, and 180 days condition will not be applicable for that. However, ICAI in its materials, it has enumerated that since it is import of goods from unrelated party, 180 days condition will still be applicable, and therefore it is a gray area. Next, coming to the compliance requirement in this case will be in order to track the creditors aging, you have to maintain a monthly and annual creditors aging tracker. And whenever you anticipate that it goes beyond 180 days, you have to reverse that ITC along with interest payment. During this pandemic, what suggestion we give is whenever you anticipate that the vendor, you will be making payment to the vendors like more than 180 days, then what you can do is, since September return will be filed within October 20th, you can take credit of such inward supplies of which you are anticipating a delay in the payment, and then reverse it, because after 20th October you are not allowed to take credit of 1920. So if you are at all anticipating a delay in payment to vendors of 1920, you first take the credit, reverse it, and whenever you make the payment to the vendors, you are eligible to take the credit. Next, coming to the third point, bill to ship to and bill from ship from arrangement. So what is this bill to ship to arrangement? One is the place of supply. The first concern that comes here is place of supply. So in this arrangement, what happens is supplier will be supplying goods to one recipient person on the direction of another third person. For example, in the picture that you will be seeing on your screen, Ravi Limited is a supplier. So he is located in Karnataka. He will be supplying goods to Bhumi Limited, which is the ultimate recipient, who is also located in Karnataka. You will be shipping those goods under the order or directions of Chandra Limited, who is the third person who is located in Gujarat. Now, in this arrangement, Chandra Limited, who is the third person under whose direction Ravi is supplying goods, will be considered as the receiver of the goods, and Ravi has to raise the invoice to Chandra Limited, and the place of supply will be Gujarat. Though, if you can observe, though Ravi Limited is supplying goods to another person in Karnataka itself, the place of supply will be that of the third person. So the place of supply will be Gujarat, and IGST will be applicable in this case. And Chandra Limited in turn will raise another invoice to Bhumi Limited. Though there are two invoices raised, that is Ravi to Chandra and Chandra to Bhumi, only one e-way bill will have to be raised, because there is only one time movement of goods. So in that case, what are the particulars that have to be given in e-way bill? In this scenario, bill from and ship from issues will come to picture. So if now e-way bill can be raised both by the supplier or the third person. So any of these persons can raise the e-way bill, but only one e-way bill has to be raised. So if at all Ravi Limited, who is the supplier, is raising the e-way bill, then bill from will be Ravi Limited, and ship from also will be Ravi Limited. But bill to will be Chandra, and the ship to will be Bhumi, because he is transferring goods to the ultimate recipient. Next, if at all the third person generates the e-way bill, then bill from, and he will be generating e-way bill under his invoice raised to the ultimate recipient. So bill from will be Chandra's, that is third person's address. Ship from will be the supplier's address. Bill to will be bill to, and ship to both will be Bhumi Limited. So next three situations are mainly because of pandemic and our advice on how you can save tax in these situations. Coming to the first one, supply of work from home facilities. So work from home is a household name now, and we can see that many employers are making arrangements to supply work from home infrastructure, like it can be laptops, it can be routers, or any devices, or to that matter even the furnitures or the working tables supplied to the employees, so that they can work freely, smoothly from their own locations. In this situation, there can be two scenarios. The company can plan it out. First, the company is not directly purchasing it. The employees are purchasing all those goods or all those laptops, devices, or the infrastructure that they need. Then the company reimburses to those employees. In this case, one, the company is not purchasing those items in its name, therefore it is losing the input tax credit. Secondly, when the reimbursement will be made to the employees, it will either go to the employees as allowances or perquisites. So in this situation, it will be a tax burden to the employees as well. So we prefer the second scenario, where we suggest the companies to purchase all those laptops or the routers or the furniture that they have to give to the employees in their own name, so that they can take the input tax credit, because they will be purchasing and they will be recording it as the assets or the expenses in its name, and it can take the input tax credit on the same. But the points that have to be kept in mind when it is doing in this manner is, one, it has to record the place and the possession, with whom this asset is, who has this possession, that it has to record. And secondly, it can plan it out. Either it can transfer the items from its own place of business to the employee's location by raising e-way bill, or it can also enter into bill to ship to arrangement with the vendor. If at all e-way bill is raised and it is sent to the employees, it has to make sure, the company has to make sure that the goods are returned back to the companies, or it gets the access to all those items, or if at all the company is planning to sell those items to the employees, it can do so by raising a tax invoice with the, if at all, if it records it under capital asset, it has to charge written down value, or if it has nominal value, then it can charge the nominal value in the tax invoice. Continuation to this is the fifth point, that is supply of laptops and related components to the employees. So previously we saw other infrastructure items also, but here it is specifically related to devices, mainly laptops and related components. We have seen many situations where a new employee is recruited, who stays out of the city or stays, and due to medical emergency or something, he had to go back to his hometown or something like that, and the company sends those laptops or related components to such employees, so that they can work from home. In such cases, the company can arrange for the transport of all those items by generating e-way bill from its place of business, or if at all the company is sending directly from the vendor, it can get into bill to ship to arrangement. However, if it is generating e-way bill, then it has to send it under delivery note for own use. Okay. And also here also you have to ensure that the goods are received back from the employees, or the employees carried back to the company. So those items should get back to the companies because it is under the company's name. However, if the company plans to sell it out to the employees at the end of the life of the asset, then it can do so at the nominal value by raising a tax invoice. Then last point being retaining registrations during pandemic. So during this situation, many companies will contemplate. Now, many companies will be having registrations in various states. Once the pandemic was struck, the companies were contemplating whether to continue the operations in those states or to shut down the operations in those states, or where the companies had the larger facilities or occupancies taken on lease no longer required, then they will be contemplating whether they have to continue with the operations or not. In such cases, we suggest that the registrations in those states need not be cancelled, because the cancellation GST registration procedure is cancellation and getting it back procedures are prolonged. So we suggest you to not cancel the GST registrations in those states. Instead, you can continue your operations and infrastructure resources in a co-workspace, with the anticipation that the operations can be restored back in a long run in a larger scale. And also you can take the ITC on the rent paid as well. So we suggest not to cancel the GST registrations in those states where you have stopped the operations because of pandemic, but you can run the operations in a small scale by taking co-workspace or something like that. Next, coming to September 2020 deadline, which is very important from today's perspective, since October 20th is around the corner. So the deadline of September return subsequent to particular financial year is seen at various places in the GST provisions. So currently September 2020 is the deadline return for the financial year 2019-20. So if we have to make any changes or if we have to make any amendments, this is the last return that we have to make it with respect to 2019-20. So I will go through point by point which are those things that have to be kept in mind while you are filing a September return before 20th October. First one being input tax credit on invoices or debit notes that are pertaining to 2019-20 should be availed within 20th of October, because it is the deadline or due date for September return. What action you have to take? First thing, you have to see what are the items that are appearing in GSTR 2A but you have not recorded in your books. Some ITC will be available in GSTR 2A, but it wouldn't have come in books. So instead of recognizing it later and identifying that it would have been taken, it is the best time to check the GSTR 2A and see that if any ITC is missed out, you can take it now. Secondly, you have to rigorously follow up with the vendors who have not filed GSTR 1 till now, because if you do not take it now, you cannot take it after filing the September return. So you have to rigorously follow up with the vendors and see that they have filed any return pending for 1920. And you should also ensure that there is no acceptance of invoices or debit notes that are relating to 1920 now, because if you accept any invoice dated 1920, you cannot take ITC after October 20th. So if at all the vendors are giving you the invoice dated in 1920, please request them to give in the latest date. Next, coming to the second one, declaration of credit note and adjustments of tax liability. So, any credit note relating to 1920 invoices can be adjusted only uh, before October 20th. So, please make sure that you have adjusted all the credit notes relating to 1920. However, if you recognize anything that has to be for which credit notes have to be raised for 1920, after October 20th, you can raise only uh, financial credit notes, and GST liability cannot be reduced from the tax liability. Next, but however, for debit notes, there is no deadline. So debit notes, you can raise it anytime because it is tax payment. Credit notes are tax reduction. So debit notes you can raise anytime, but credit notes have to be considered in the returns for the financial year 1920 only till September return. Next, coming to rectification and amendments of errors or omissions that have happened during 1920, which you can make it in this period, that is in September return. So, if any amendments you want to make it relating to 1920 and you want to reduce tax or add on tax, this is the final return that you can make those things. Next, coming to ITC part, in Rule 36 says gives the restriction on ITC up to 110% of the eligible credit available in GSTR 2A. However, this provision was relaxed by the government when this pandemic was struck, that cumulative adjustment can be made for February to August. Means February 2020 to August 2020, the government said to the registered persons, you take whatever ITC is available with you. However, in September return, you have to reverse all those items which are not appearing in GSTR 2A cumulatively from February to August and reverse it in the September return. Here, one point that have to be noticed is this is spread over 2 financial years. That is, February and March is coming in 2019-20, and the remaining April to August is coming in 2021. So those months, that is February and March, relating to 1920, if at all it is not coming in 2A, there is no other go. You have to expense it off. You cannot claim it after September. However, from April to August, if anything is not coming in 2A, you can carry it forward and check those items in GSTR 2A in the further periods also. Then coming to reversal of ITC. So where inputs and input services are used both for business and non-business purposes, and where inward supplies are used both for taxable and exempt supplies, these are called common input tax credit. So these have to be reversed, and these have to be proportionately reversed to give effect only to the taxable supplies. This is called Rule 42 reversals, and provisionally, as per the law, every month you have to identify how much is the exempt, how much is the taxable supply, how much is the common ITC, and you have to reverse proportionately relating to exempt supplies. And finally, at last, during after the financial year is over, before September return, you have to again proportionally calculate, and any excess reversal has to be done. You have to do that excess reversal, and any you have reversed more, then you can take the credit of such reversal also. Next, next, coming to the precautions and requirements for annual return and GST audit of 1920. So this is the preparedness of GST audit for 2019-20. So I'm sure most of you would have filed your 2018-19 GST audit annual returns. For those who have not filed, we have time till 31st October. So now that 18-19 is almost over and at the edge, we need to acknowledge that for financial year 2017-18 and 18-19, being the initial years of GST regime, the government gave many relaxations with respect to various tables, and many tables were not made mandatory. It was just optional with respect to filling of GSTR 9 and 9C. However, for 1920, there are chances that they make this mandatory, and it should not be like the companies are not yet ready for those information. So it is the right time, since you have already filed 2018-19 audit, you have finished the audit and you have filed the annual returns. You have to prepare for the 1920 audit by keeping all this information ready. So what are those information? I will take you through first outward supply and then inward supply. In outward supply in 2017-18 and 18-19 formats of GSTR 9 and 9C, it was not necessary to declare credit notes and debit notes separately in GSTR 9. However, it was allowed to set off against the outward supply itself. It could have been shown as net outward supply, but it is mandatory, it will be mandatory from 1920 onwards that it has to be shown separately. So we suggest you to maintain a register for credit notes and debit notes separately, so that those amounts can be declared separately in 9. Next, coming to the second one being the amendments. So same like credit notes and debit notes, even amendments made in GSTR 1 and 3B was not mandatory to be shown separately. However, it could have been shown as net of outward supplies. But however, in 1920, it may come as mandatory table that even amendments you have to declare it separately. So please have a tracker of what all amendments you have made, which months you have made, so that it can be declared separately and easily in GSTR 9 of coming years. Next, last one will be the exempted and nil rated. This is miscellaneous. So in this also, exempted, nil rated and non-GST supply, they relaxed the provision that you can put all these exempted non GST supply or nil rated supply in one table, that is exempted supply, but however you have to give it separately. Next, coming to inward supplies, reporting, this is one of the very important point in GSTR 9 table, that is reporting of inward supplies into inputs, input services and capital goods. However, there was relaxation that all these things you can put under one single head, that is inputs. But in 1920, they will make it mandatory that all the inward supplies have to be categorized into input, input services and capital goods. So we request you to please maintain a column in the inward register to show whether this particular purchase is input or capital goods or input services, so that it can be easily filtered and put in the respective table. Next, coming to the detailed reconciliation of GSTR 2A. For 2017 and 18-19, GSTR 2A reconciliation was not so important. Even if we were getting negative, we used to sail through without any reconciliation. However, in 1920, they will make it mandatory to give GSTR 2A reconciliation with the ITC availed, since from October 2019 onwards, they made it mandatory to take it as per GSTR 2A itself. So if they identify that you are getting water ITC as per GSTR 3B more than GSTR 2A, they will definitely going to ask you the reason for it, and you have to produce documents for such a huge difference. So we suggest you to maintain from now only, from April 2019 onwards, proper reconciliation with GSTR 2A. Then in 2017-18 and 18-19, it was not mandatory to show the ITC availed during April to September relating to the previous year. Though you had received the goods or services in the previous year, but you had recorded it as ITC in the next year, it was not mandatory. But you have to keep a track of what you have taken ITC in the next year relating to this year, and it will be mandatory to declare all those things in GSTR 9. So coming to the general points, So these are miscellaneous, declaring the refund, sanction, rejected, and any demand notices that have come to the company. All these things were optional in first 2 years. Now it will be mandatory. So please keep it in mind. Next, third point is the main and very important thing that most of us struggle with. That is keeping HSN and SSC summary of outward supplies and inward supplies. So here, when the suggestion is when you are maintaining a register of outward supply, please maintain even one column that says the HSN code and SAC code of each line item. Same applies to even the inward supplies and also credit notes and debit notes. For every register, please maintain the HSN codes and SAC codes. Otherwise, at the time of filing the GSTR 9 and 9C, it will be a huge problem, or it is time consuming work. So you have to make sure that you have maintained the HSN and SAC code along with the quantity details also. So please maintain such things. And lastly, relating to GSTR 9C, the difference between financials and the turnover declared in GSTR 9, whatever was the difference in 2017-18 and 18-19, we could have easily put it under other adjustments. However, in 1920, we will be required to give the detailed line by line reasons for what is the difference. So we have to be very particular about what is the reconciliation and what is the difference between the financial and the turnover declared in GSTR 9. And also very time consuming work in GSTR 9C is expense wise breakup of input tax credit. Here, as per profit and loss account, as per your profit and loss account, the expenses covered in your P&L account, you have to give the input tax credit breakup. So this is a tedious work. So what we suggest is, from now on or for the past, that is 2019-20 onwards, in the register, maintain a column saying under which expense head it is covered. How you maintain in the books, and in the books under which expense head it will be covered, in the same expense head, please mention in the inward register also, so that when you filter out those expenses, you can easily fill this particular table of GSTR 9C. So moving forward, I am now handing over the next topic to Pujita, who will be handling recent changes and amendments in GST law.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Pavni, for providing us insights on action points on high priority. Now, I will be talking about the recent changes and amendments in GST. So, starting off with the first point. Next slide. Yeah. So, starting off with the first notification number 48, which deals with the electronic verification code for filing GSTR 1 and 3B. Earlier, the companies and LLPs had to obtain DSC to verify and file their GSTR 3B return online, but the rest of the taxpayers could either do it with the two options, that is DSC code or EBC option. But with the restriction imposed during this COVID-19 outbreak in India, registered businesses found it very challenging to access the DSC USB token for compliance purposes. Sorry for the inconvenience caused. I was talking about the notification number 48, which deals with the electronic verification mode of GSTR 1 and 3B. So yeah, electronic verification mode. Earlier, the companies and LLPs had to obtain DSE to verify and file their returns. But now, because of this pandemic, it is becoming very challenging and inconvenient for the businessmen to use the DSE and to safeguard the DSE and file the GST returns. So this EBC option has been introduced. So the authorized signatory of the taxpayer receives an OTP on their valid email address or the mobile number registered. So after verifying the return using this OTP, the user can successfully file the GSTR 3B return. So this is not only with respect to GSTR 3B, it is this EBC option has also given for GSTR 1 return also for the tax period from April to September 2020. So going to the next notification, notification 44, which talks about filing GSTR 3B through short messaging services, which is called as SMS services. This option is given for filing the nil return of GSTR 3B through SMS. So what is nil return? Let us know what is called a nil return. Nil return is no supply made of goods or services, including nil rated or exempt or non-GST supplies. No interest or no late fee liabilities payable. No supplies on which tax needs to be discharged under reverse charge mechanism. No other liability to be discharged. When all this satisfies, then you can file a nil return, and it is called a nil return when there is no tax payable, since there is no outward supplies made or inward supplies to claim ITC. So how to file GSTR 3B through SMS? I will just brief you about it. So you have to send an SMS to the number 14409, typing NIL space GSTR 3B space GSTR number and tax period in the format and YYYY. So that is, if you want to file for the return May, then you have to write 052020 and send this SMS, and then you'll get a 6-digit validation code. So the next message should be CNF space 3B space that 6-digit verification code, and send the same message to the same numbers of 14409. And then you get a confirmation message with ARN number, which will tell you that nil return has been successfully filed. For any assistance, you can type in help space 3B, the same number, and CBIC will give you assistance for in this case. So this is all about notification number 44, which you can file GSTR 3B through SMS. And it is not just for GSTR 3B, you can also file a nil return for GSTR 1, which has been later notified in July with the notification number 58. So moving on to the next notification number, that is notification number 57, which tells you about the maximum late fee on GSTR 3B. So this relief is for all class normal taxpayers with the turnover limit above 5 crores as well as below 5 crores. So when a GST registered business misses filing GST return with the prescribed due date, so some amount of late fees collected. So in the previous to this notification, the act was 25 rupees per day for CGST, 25 rupees for SGST. So combined IGST would be 50 rupees per day of delay in late filing of the return. So, but through this notification, the maximum cap of the late fee has made to 250 rupees for CGST, 250 rupees for SGST, and IGST as 500 rupees. So maximum for the tax period from February to September, if it has been late paid, lately filed, then only this 500 rupees would be collected as the late fee and not above 500. So, but now, even if the tax liability is nil for such tax period, then no late fee shall be levied. So the overall cap under this notification becomes 500 rupees as late fee for the late filing of return. So going to the next notification number 54 under Central Tax Act, it says this is just a due date for GSTR 3B for the month of August. It is only for those taxpayers category where the annual return, annual turnover in the preceding financial year is less than 5 crores. So for Karnataka, it is October 1st. Usually it is, if it is August month, then it will be September 20th. But then relaxation has been given for these taxpayers below 5 crores, saying 10 days relaxation has been given, and October 1st becomes the due date for filing GSTR 3B for the month of August. For few states, it is October 1st, and few states, it is October 3rd. For Karnataka, it is October 1st. So moving forward to the next notification number 63, this is the central tax notification, which was released on 25th August. So this is a very interesting to know that the 39th GST Council recommendation on laws and procedures presented that interest for delay in payment of GST should be charged on net tax net cash tax liability and not on the gross tax liability. So previously, the law was silent and it was made on the gross. Most of the people were making on the gross tax liability. For example, I'll tell you, like if the tax liability was 1 lakh and you have a eligible credit of 60,000 and the cash component was 40,000. So when the interest has to be calculated, it should be only on the cash component of 40,000 and not on 1 lakh. Because already the 60,000 is with the government as in the form of credits. So only this 40,000 which you are paying it late as a penalty, as an interest, you have to file. You have to pay the interest only on this cash component of 40,000. So amendment as per Finance Act also tells that it has been made, this provision has been made effect prospectively from 1st September 2020, but the GST Council recommendation was made starting from the GST regime, that is the 1st July 2017. So this is a debatable point, like if any of you have paid interest based on the gross tax liability, you can claim refund on this purpose. And nothing is clarified as such. And there's also a case law, a Madras High Court case law, which is Refex Industries Limited, dealing with the same issue. The issue is how should the interest be calculated on delayed payments? That is, it is on the gross liability or the net liability. So the judgment passed by this High Court is the interest is levied on overdue cash payment, however, not on the ITC available on the same time with the Department of the Credit of the assessee. That is, it can demand interest only on the cash component of the tax remitted with delay, but not on the ITC available. Finally, it is calculated on net tax liability. That is only on the 40,000 in my example. So next point is notification number 4 by 2020. This is the central tax rate notification, which deals with exemption on export freight. This is as per the place of provision, as per the provisions of place of supply, goods supplied on vessel or aircraft, the place of supply should be the location at which goods are taken on board. That is, if it is export freight, that is as a service by way of transportation of goods by an aircraft or vessel from customers clearance or in India to outside India. So the goods are taken on board in India. So the place of supply should also be considered as India. So this notification, especially, it is from the GST regime, it is being exempted. So in 25th Council, it was exempted to 2018, and in 28th GST Council, it was exempted to 2019. And finally, Nirmala Sitharaman had told it is again extended to 2020 as a Diwali gift to all the exporters, because the cost does not increase for the exporters. So as an incentive, it was shifted to 2020. And finally, on September 30th, 2020, they again extended to 1 more year. So this might be taxable in the next year, that is September 2020-21. So it is a big relief for all the exporters because there's an exemption on this export freight, which is actually taxable as per GST law, and it is being extended as an exemption for another year. And next, coming to the GSTR 2B auto drafted statement, it is a brief statement which has the eligible and ineligible ITC for each month. It is very similar to GSTR 2A, but but it contains constant for a period. GSTR 2A keeps changing month-on-month basis, but then GSTR 2B is constant for a period. And if it is started from August 2020, and if you want to derive this 2B statement for the month of August, then you have to wait till September 12th, 2020 to derive this GSTR 2B return. And this covers eligible and ineligible ITC credit for each month, and it is available for all regular taxpayers. Every recipient can generate it on the basis of GSTR 1, GSTR 5, or GSTR 6 furnished by the supplier. And this statement will clearly show document-wise details of ITC eligibility. When you log on to the portal, you can see a table called all summary-based information. Also, you can take it. And there's another table which all tables. It's a very exclusive statement. You can see each table under what it comes, and not just a summary. It's a very brief statement. And also, let me just talk about the importance and benefits of this GSTR 2B, which is a new concept in this GST regime. It helps in easier identification of documents to ensure the input tax credit is not available twice against a particular document, or the tax credit is reversed as per GST law in the 3B whenever required. And also, GST is correctly paid on reverse charge for the applicable documents, including import of services. So when you open this GSTR, I will tell you how to use this GSTR 2B also. When you log on to the portal and go to return dashboard and select the period or the year, and you get in the second column GSTR 2B return. So when you click on that, you get an exclusive statement, and this statement can be downloaded as per PDF or in Excel format. And it gives you it has all the columns. It has documents provided, or you can filter out through supplier wise filtration, or you have a numerous columns, whether ITC eligible, the description, the GSTN number, the invoice number, everything is there, and you can download it and you can filter and sort it as per your convenience. And and also the content and features of this GSTR 2B is, as I told you, summary statement showing ITC available and non-available for each section is available in GSTR 2B. Also, advisory section for every section that clarifies the kind of action that the taxpayer must take. In the advisory section, you have the cutoff dates saying, as I told you previously, for August month, if you want to get the GSTR 2B, then you have to wait till 12th September. And then it records a particular statement which is eligible, which is not eligible, and you can derive the statement. So, and where input tax credit will be marked as not available is in two scenarios. The first scenario is when the limit to avail input tax credit has been expired. That is before September return of the following financial year, or the GST annual return, whichever is earlier. So in this, if you have exceeded the time limit, and obviously the ITC credit will be shown as ineligible, and availability will be shown as no. And the second case is when the state of the supplier and the place of supply is the same, but whereas the recipient is located in another state. That is when if CGST, SGST is charged by the supplier in the same name, but whereas the recipient can't take the benefit because it has to be charged as IGST for them. So because of this conflict, again, it will show it as ITC as not eligible in this case. So we have looked into the two scenarios where ITC will be shown as not available. So next, let's move on to the features of GSTR 2B. It is very interesting. So the first feature is you can view or download the summary statement in PDF file or in Excel file. Or you can also obtain the section-wise details or complete download of ITC instantly. And you can also reconcile with your books instantly, like what is available, what is not available. Also, text search for all the generated records is available. An email or SMS will be sent to the taxpayer informing about the generation of GSTR 2B. So when you log into the portal and when you download GSTR 2B, an email or SMS will be sent to the taxpayer, the authorized signatory, when you're downloading it, so that he gets to know that it is downloaded. And a comparison between 2A and 2B is 2A is it keeps on changing from day to day, month on month, but 2B is very constant, and frequency of availability for 2A as well as 2B is monthly basis only. But sources of information for 2B is only GSTR 1, 5, and 6. But then for 2A, it also includes 7 and 8 also, GSTR 7 and 8. So this is all about GSTR 2B, which is a new introduction. So please check out this feature, which is very helpful. And moving on to the next topic, that is the circular section 135/2005/2020, which gives a clarification on refund related issues. So first issue which has been taken up under this circular is bunching of refund claims across financial years. So before this circular, what was the act? I will let you know that the period for which refund claim has been filed cannot spread across different financial years. That is, example, if I'm applying for refund from Jan 2020, I could have applied only till Jan 2020 to March 2020. I had to apply one refund, and next refund had to start from April 2020 to whatever date, because the financial year ends on March 2020. And before this notification, I couldn't bunch two different financial years in my refund application. But after this circular, I could now I can this restriction has been removed, and refund can be claimed by clubbing different months across successive financial years. So there is also a case law called Pitambar Books Private Limited, which received supplies at the end of the financial year but made exports in the next financial year. So the High Court decided that Section 54 does not impose this restriction in clubbing. So by way of this circular, it has been clarified that bunching of refunds can be done, and that option is also available in the portal now. So you can bunch the refund applications across the financial years. So second issue which we are dealing in this circular is ITC refund under inverted duty structure due to the reduction in GST rate. That is, let me explain what was the issue here. The refund claimed of unutilized ITC on account of inverted duty structure, where the inversion is due to change in the GST rate on the same goods. A clarification was provided on this, that where the input and the output being the same goods, attracting different tax rates, but at different points in time. It's just the timing difference that the rates have been changed, but it's the same input, same output, same goods at the same time, but it's just the act which has been changed and the tax rates which has been changed across the time gap. Only because of that, you cannot go under refund under inverted duty structure. It does not fall under inverted duty structure. So this does not cover under provisions of Section 54. And if this happens, you cannot claim refund under this scenario under inverted duty structure. Hope everyone is understanding and I'm audible and I'm clear. And moving to the next issue is a change in manner of refund of tax paid on supplies other than zero-rated supplies. So this tells there would not be debit from the ITC from ECL at the time of refund claim. So whenever we are applying for the refund, there would be a debit in the to the equaling to the amount of the refund application. But refund is paid in cash even if the payment is partly made through ITC and cash payment. So this was leading to encashment of the credit balance. So, but after this introduction of the circular, they have made the refund admissible proportionately in the respective of original mode of payment. That is, if the refund has been applied partly for the through ECL purpose and partly through the cash payment purpose, so in the same proportionate, the one half of the proportion will be credited to the ECL and another half will be credited as being given in cash basis. So this is about the uh, a change in the manner of refund of tax paid. So moving to the next issue, which will be discussed in this circular, is restriction of ITC refund of GSTR 2A. So before, the refund of ITC relating to invoices not reflecting in GSTR 2A was admissible by uploading the invoice copies. But now what they have made is only whatever is appearing in GSTR 2A, only the credit, whatever is appearing in GSTR 2A, only those credits can be taken as refund, and there is no option of uploading the new invoices for refund purpose. And this was inserted because of the insertion of Rule 36(4). Like Pavni explained, that 110% of the eligible credit of ITC which is available for the months from Jan onwards, Jan 20 onwards. So that now it is made that whatever credit which is appearing in GSTR 2A only you can take the refund, and not which is not appearing in GSTR 2A, you cannot take the refund. So in this way, they are making more people to promptly pay the promptly file the returns and get their credits respectively. And so rigorous follow-up for filing the returns and getting the credit should also be made. So it is an added advantage to the department. And next issue is a requirement to mention the HSN and SAC code in statement of invoices. As per the new format, the HSN and SAC code column has been inserted for this particular GSTN, for this supplier, and for this description. Even HSN SAC code has to be affixed, and then only a statement of invoice is it is said to be in an acceptable format for the department. It should be readily available for them, whether it is appearing in GSTR 2A or not. What is the description of the goods? What is the GSTN number? What is the place of supply? Whether it is input or input services or capital goods. The full detailed statement of invoices should be provided to claim the refund. So this is about this circular. 135 is a very important circular, and which has lot of points to remember and lot of points we inculcate in our daily life for all our clients. So this is an important circular. Moving to the next circular, section 139. Which talks about accumulated input tax credit. So as I told you in the previous notification, that told ITC can be claimed only on those credits which is available in GSTR 2A. So, but for few inputs like import of services or the input which is paid on reverse charge basis, for all this it does not appear in your GSTR 2A. You have to claim your self-tax invoice, you have to raise, and you can claim the refund on these also. On these, in the meaning refund of ITC on invoices of input and input services liable to reverse charge. And moving to the next circular, which is circular number 140/10, which talks about GST on directors' remuneration. I'll just give you a brief insight of this. It is if the director, if he's a whole-time director, then you have to pay GST on reverse charge basis. If he's an employee director, then there is no charge on, there's no GST supply. So based on this, is the registration mandatory for directors? No, unless the director has separate income which is liable for GST, and it is not mandatory for directors. So what is the place of supply for directors? Is the place of supply can be determined on the director's resident address, and accordingly CGST, SGST or IGST can be charged based on this. If the director's residence address and the company's location is on the same state, then CGST, SGST should be charged. If it's in the different states, then IGST has to be charged. This should be kept in mind while paying the credit. And also the time of supply for GST remuneration is as it falls on the reverse charge basis as per the time of supply provisions in GST Act. It says date of payment of the director's remuneration or 61st day of the date of invoice, whichever is earlier, then the time of supply arises. So this definition as director would fall under relatives, hence the regulations on the time of supply also, which is applicable to relatives, that is reverse charge, that is 60 days at date of payment, is applicable in this case. And the next thing, what has been clarified in this circular is what is the GST rate on directors' remuneration? It is 18%. So is reimbursements to be made taxable? I would say yes. However, traveling on boarding expenses incurred towards attending board meetings can be excluded. Otherwise, the reimbursements to be made taxable in case of director sitting fees. And the most common question is ITC available on this expense? Yes, ITC can be availed by the company. So this is with the circulars and notifications. And moving to the next slide, that is eligibility on ITC on COVID-19 related expenses. During this pandemic, Ministry of Home Affairs has come out with an order saying ITC on face masks, PPE kits, sanitizers, sanitization services for office and factory premises can be taken credit. And invoices has to be in the name of expenditure invoice has to be in the name of the registered entity along with mentioning proper GSTN numbers. And in its books of accounts, in the registered person's books of accounts, separate ledger accounts should be maintained, and this expense should not be considered as personal consumption expenses. So this is all about eligibility of ITC on COVID-19 related expenses. Moving on to the last topic from my side is Karnataka Industrial Policy. This policy, Karnataka Industrial Policy, emerging as a global leader in advanced manufacturing, research and development and innovation, and to create an ecosystem for the inclusive, balanced and sustainable development of the states. And I will just let you know a few of the objectives of Karnataka Industrial Policy. And one of the main objectives is to establish brand Karnataka in the global markets and to promote Karnataka as one of the top 3 investment destinations in the country, and to promote Karnataka as a hub of entrepreneurs, so that all investments comes to Karnataka, and even it facilitates investments in advanced research and development and manufacturing and innovation, and it also maintains annual industrial growth rate up to 10%. And the key sectors identified by this policy also includes automobiles, defenses, aerospace, renewable energy, electrical vehicles, etc. And this Karnataka Industrial Policy gives more insights or more benefits to MSMEs. And this will be given on production turnover based subsidies. And the subsidy will be based on the 10% of their turnover each year for 5 years, but it will be limited to 20 or 30% of the value of the fixed assets based on the zones which they come under. And all these incentives which is appearing on the screen, such as tax exemption on electric tariff and interest subsidies on loans for technology upgradation, or reimbursement of land conversion fees, or subsidies for sustainable operation strategies, or power subsidies, or any other subsidies, and more other subsidies is given to these MSMEs. And this is about Karnataka Industrial Policy 2025. And by this, I would like to hand over to my colleague Basavaraj sir, who would take you forward with important judicial announcements. Thank you, one and all.
Hello. Good evening, you all. Thank you, all of you, for patient hearing. This is being a long session and going more than 60 minutes. We have to appreciate us that we have brought to you all important from the time from the importance of your business. Whatever the Pujita and Bhavani have spoken about, details are very important from the present time as well as from your business point of view. Now that I'm talking on the few judicial pronouncements, which would include AR ruling as well as High Court judgments. here we have covered, there are many judgments, many ruling from advance ruling, like on a daily basis, 2 or 3 rulings are coming. In a year, if you see 1,000 rulings will be there from all the states. Now that from your business point of view, as well as your cash flow point of view, input tax credit point of view, as well as your audit is due from the department, that you are if you are done a turnover of more than 25 to 50 crore, will be definitely selected for a scrutiny by the department. And if you have obtained any refund from the department, also will be subjected to 100% department audits. So during the department audits, what would be the the common things the government would like to view is whether you have any notice period recovery, you have made any payments to the director, whether we have any foreign payments. Instead of going to the core aspects of GST collection, they would be definitely coming to only these kind of activities. Why? Because they will have very less time and a large number of audit to close. So during this time, they will only concentrate on very commonly asked questions in all the audits. So concerning those issues, we are going to bring some of the case laws which may bring to you some kind of a relief. As Pujita was mentioning in Circular 140, that director remuneration to be taxable in GST or not, that circular was issued due to the reason that there were two adverse ruling on the director payments. That one advance ruling from Karnataka, advance ruling on Alcon Consulting Industry Private Limited, there they said that any payments made to director is liable to GST without looking at whether really director payments are liable to GST or not. That advance ruling was given there, that the RCM notification speaks that any payments to director would attract GST, and accordingly any payments made to director in a company, irrespective of his capacity, what he has worked with the company, it is liable to tax. Basis that advance ruling, Claycraft India, which is located in Rajasthan, has gone for an advance ruling from that state. There, in this company, that important unique of this company is like the company was having 6 directors. All the 6 directors were getting fixed salary. On this fixed salary, they were not discharging any GST. But importantly, the commission paid on their appraisal, they were discharging GST. Understanding this Alcon Industry advance ruling from Karnataka, that director payments may be questioned later, they applied for advance ruling. Here in this case, what advance ruling was rendered, that GST on commission is liable to pay tax, and the salaries also will be liable to GST. But the important point missed out by the AR office is, like before levying any GST on any turnover, whether it is on outward side or inward side, it should be first coming under the levy section. Under CGST Act Section 7 and IGST Act 5, you should have to be levied to tax, then only there should be a levy on those payments. How do we determine these levy? Under Section 17, the levy will be on the supply. Supply made in the form of sale, exchange, lease, rental for a consideration only would attract GST. Subject to that, if any arrangement that supply or recipient is mentioned in the 3rd schedule, it is not going to be considered as supply. And the director, if he has worked with the company in the capacity of employee, in that case, the GST on that director payments is not going to be applied. Where the GST on director payments is applied, it will be when director rendered any service to the company under his professional capacity, or director has obtained any sitting fee when he is not an employee of the company. So in the nutshell, the employee of the company who is also a director, as well as full-time director and managing director, payments made to them will not attract GST. If director is getting any professional fee or retainer fee, not being employee of the company, it will be chargeable to tax. That is what Circular 140 was clarified. So these advance ruling, the ruling made in the advance ruling were adverse actually. So for that reason, the circular clarification was given. Next. So next advance ruling is from the Telangana state. In this case, as you notice that now Karnataka, no private developer is interested in developing any land for factories. here every developer is interested only in developing their plots for IT industries. So if you can see Andhra Pradesh, Telangana and Tamil Nadu, their large private developers are there who will take care of developing land for factories. So the government also, whenever any land is given on lease, like KIDB also gives the land on lease, all these payments are covered under exemption. If you can take Tamil Nadu SIPCOT is dealing with the land lending to the factory activities. In that case, the lease payment made to the SIPCOT or KIDB is coming under the exemption. What about the privately developed land given on lease to the factory or any other activities? Whether it is liable to tax or not is the question sought from the air office. In this case, the 33-year lease was obtained from the one private developer by Daisel Chiral Technologies, and lease payments were made of 10 crore. It is for 33-year lease. Lease. In this case, the Daisel Chiral obtained this lease arrangement from the developer for the purpose of building in that land. So here made a noting that this lease is obtained for the construction of building, and construction of building citing the section 17, which is blocked credit list. There any inwards or inward services received for construction of building or works contract will be disallowed, citing the point that the Daisel Chiral has obtained this land for construction of building. You have availed this land lease for the purpose of construction of building, and since construction of building is mentioned in the blocked list, that GST credit will not be given to you. The advance ruling was given. But the important point here office has lost here is how this lease payment is capitalized in the books of account. They did not see whether it is going to be booked as prepaid payments or is entire amount capitalized along with the building, or for other purpose it is booked in the books of accounts. They did not go into it. They just looked at the manifesto entered by Daisel Chiral with the developer and understood that entire inward services received for the construction of building, and accordingly delivered the AR ruling, which will be questioned in the subsequent forums. Next. Okay, this is a case like right from the GST being implemented, we have a lot of confusion whether any perquisites or any goods or services supplied to employees should be made liable to GST in the company's hand. Like if you get example, if you can take food supply to employee, or transportation services given to the employees, where nominal charges are collected from the employees, whether it is liable to tax or not. The last 3 years, there was a lot of dilemma, confusion. Many people followed their own understanding about this compliance, and somebody were paying GST on those requeries made from the employees. Somebody were not paying, considering employer-employee relationship. Under this AR ruling, this is sought from the Maharashtra Tata Motors India Limited. In this company, what they did, they bought a TT vehicle vehicle for the purpose of enabling their employees commutation between factory and their homes. In this case, they were also collecting some nominal cost of transportation from the employees. The two questions were asked from the AR was on the whether ITC paid on vehicle is eligible to create or not, and if any nominal cost on the transportation of their transportation is liable to tax or not was the question asked. In this case, what AR mentioned that nominal cost record from the employee, since employer-employee relationship exists here, in that case there will not be any GST levy on that, and in case the vehicle having more than 13-seat capacity, which will not come under the blocked list category, and accordingly, if a company has incurred any expenditure on buying the vehicle which has a more than 13-seat capacity seater, in that case they can take the credit on the purchase of that vehicle. Ruling was given. This is very welcome move by the AR. First time they went against revenue and gave the ruling in favor of taxpayer. Next. This is the very important one. Inverted duty structure, no, the concept of inverted duty structure, your GST paid on inwards will be more than what you will be going to pay on your outward supplies, whether outward supply made in goods or services. In the case you procure any goods or services, after value addition, you make a supply of goods or services where the GST paid on the inwards being 28% or 18%, where in the outward supply it is attracting at 5% or 12%. In that case, the accumulated ITC credit being the GST paid on inward supply being more, will be given the unutilized input tax credit refund from the department. Here the question is whether all the input tax credit, whether it is input services, will be allowed to get the input tax refund or not, was the question. As per the Act, only input is available for refund. Input services is not available. In the case of VKC Footsteps, where it is held in the Gujarat High Court in the writ petition, there they said input means it should include input service also, and accordingly taxpayer should be given a refund on the input services also. But in the case of Madras High Court, they took an adverse view. They said that the government intention to give refund only on the inputs means it should be applicable to input. It cannot include input services. There is a two different judgment is given, and there is a still confusion going on, and the taxpayer is under big confusion now that which case law they have to refer to include input services. But important thing is like the High Court, the government or High Court have forgotten that on the outward supply, they are allowing goods or services to participate in the refund process, but restricting only input will make a lot of confusion on the taxpayer. Next. Mohit Minerals is a case where that if you are a manufacturer, if you are also importing a lot of goods from outside India, in that case you must have paid ocean freight. On the ocean freight, considering that as import of service, there are circulars from the department to say that it is liable to GST and reverse charge mechanism. But the only thing is that whatever ocean freight is paid on the import of goods, whether import of goods is made on CIF basis or FOB basis, in both the cases under customs, the GST on freight or insurance is already paid. On FOB basis is on actual basis, and the CIF basis on a standard formula basis, the GST on freight and insurance was already paid. And asking once again on the ocean freight paid separately by the taxpayer shouldn't be asked to the GST once again, was the Madras High Court the judgment given under Mohit Minerals Private Limited. As per this judgment, that ocean freight anybody is paying separately. If they have included, if they have paid a custom duty on their import clearance, in that case they need not separately once again pay GST, is the judgment made in the Gujarat High Court. Next. G and TD and D India Limited. In this case, what has happened in your every departmental audit, whether it is service tax or GST, they are going to ask one question whether GST on notice period recovery is collected or not. Until March 2020, this judgment was not available. Even tribunals, there was no judgment available. Wherever service tax department was taken up. Now, why we brought this even after 3 years of GST implementation, still GST audits or investigation is relevant from the department point of view. GST audit to initiate, they have lost the time already, but they are bringing under investigation route. They are calling for a books of accounts under investigation route, and still coming to your premises for verification for the compliances under service tax. So whether a notice period recovery collected from the employee should be made subject to service tax or not was the point discussed in the this case. In this case, the department made a point that employee has paid back some amount of notice pay to the company. The company is collecting that money, so it is a form of tolerating an act or refraining an act from the so it should be liable to service tax was the department question. In this case, Madras High Court said that this notice period recovery either from the employer or employee, if they are not meeting the notice period condition, in that case, each has to exchange with some consideration. It should definitely come under the employment contract, and applying the employer-employee relationship, it should not be liable to service tax was the judgment given. So if in your company, if you have collected any notice period recovery from the employee, it will not be subject to service tax. And if you have any ongoing case with the department under service tax, you can definitely put this case law before them and pray for a relief from the service tax sought on the employee recovery. Next. Yeah, this is one very important case law. The High Court has Orissa High Court has given very the landmark judgment on the one of the input tax credit blocked list where usually in the case of a construction or works contract, input tax credit eligibility is not there. In this case, the case would be like this Safari Retreats Private Limited was engaged in the construction of building, and after the construction, they used to give that for the let out purpose. So if construction is done, and in the forward direction, if the construction activity is not used for the another construction work, in that case, input tax credit under blocked list is not allowed. But under this case, the person after the construction is going to let out those buildings for the lease purpose. The case was taken up by the Orissa High Court in the writ petition, said that if the construction on the building is taken up and later building is let out in the in a forward direction, in that case it is definitely used in the furtherance of business, and accordingly whatever GST paid on the construction has to be allowed to take credit, and this credit has to be only utilized against the outward tax liability of the arising from the rental income, like that. High Court judgment was given. This is one very welcome move from the High Court, and this case is appealed before the Supreme Court by the Revenue. As of now, High Court says that the GST paid on construction activity can be taken, provided the input tax credit can be offset against only on the rental income, and Revenue has gone on a appeal against this case law. Yeah, I have finished now.
Thank you everyone for joining the webinar and for your patience. In the meantime, if at all you have any questions, you can type in the chat box, and we'll be happy to answer them. And also, I would like to thank Basavaraju sir, Pujita, and Pavani for giving us their valuable feedback. And the recording of this webinar will be shared to you via email. So request you to check your email. We'll send you across the recording in 1-2 days. Thank you everyone. Thank you for attending the webinar.
No questions. No questions.